How are you doing?
Good.
Awesome.
Some reminder announcements up.
Hey, Sam, where are you?
Where am I? 90 miles south of where you ought to be, or could be.
Oh.
At home, basically. I was in Chicago last week.
How was that?
Actually, company considers it pretty successful. I was somewhat stressed until the event because up until 30 minutes of my talk time was still trying to figure out what my content was going to be for my marketing department.
Great, a collaboration with the moment.
Let's always say just in time, right?
Yeah.
But CEO seemed reasonably happy with it. Had a number of other meetings following, so
yeah.
I didn't get fired.
That's a good day.
Hello, Stacy.
Stacy, you're fuzzy. What device are you using, Stacy?
Your audio's not online.
Oh, that's a big mic.
You're still
We're not getting any
muted.
sound.
What about now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now.
It's a push button, so I never know if it's pushed or not pushed.
Push to talk. Wow, that's like.
No, just once. Just push to turn it on.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a walkie-talkie.
Just grabbing my coffee.
So, Tammy, how long are you in Europe this time for?
Close to 3 months.
Oh, wow. So you're going to be there through Christmas then?
The date that I must return according to the 90-day rule is Christmas Day. We'll probably come back around the 15th. So I've landed for solstice and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's what's potentially going to happen. Yeah, it's really interesting being in Europe and just sort of thinking about the different cultural context and what it feels like to be here in a very progressive country where the climate is very much like Vancouver. So I have all those signals. There's some differences, but mostly not. And a different language.
How are you dealing with the language, by the way? Are you picking up any?
I haven't been really focused on it. So yeah, I can kind of follow stuff. German's a lot easier for me though, or French. But I don't really have a basis for the linguistic gymnastics that Dutch is. And so I don't have it in my ear yet in terms of knowing how the letters equal to the sounds. So that's my current missing piece. Mm-hmm. And just, it's a time investment and things have been going fast, man. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Doug, you're posting to the group. Yeah. You look occupied.
Just getting announcements up. Sam, can you make me co-host, please?
Ah, right.
Yeah.
It would be great if you were to also make me co-host and Harry when he joins. I mean, Stacy too. Well, whatever. Soundscapes. I like to be able to mute environmental sounds if needed. Oh, Doug, now you have to give me co-host because
you're already co-host, Tammy.
Oh, I
did
know.
co-host first, yeah.
You did. It doesn't say so.
Well, then Zoom is buggy because I did the incantation that it required. Now Doug will have to try.
Hey, thanks, Doug.
No worries.
There's an alarm going off. I'm going to go turn off the alarm and be right back.
Great.
Okay. Another 4 minutes of folks drifting in that might be moved to do so.
Yeah.
Doug, how's the book going?
We've revised and rewritten completely, and we just finished reformatting the revised version for second round circulation solicitation feedback. So
Second session I'll make. I did read half of it. And then too many things just came up.
no worries. Well, the help is appreciated, the offer is appreciated, and it's a very different work.
Mhm.
So it'll be very interesting to see how people respond to the changed version. Hello, Les. It's always a mystery whether we're going to see you or not. We're not seeing your thumb, but we're not necessarily seeing you either. There you are.
There's a half a face.
You're emerging from the darkness. So Stacy, you've been wandering and on walkabout for a while. We haven't seen you for a while. What have you been up to?
Mostly dealing with getting my real life in order. Summer was a nice vacation time. So now it's
Welcome, Harry.
Hello,
hello.
We can hear you.
I can talk.
You can.
It's 5 o'clock here, and I'm having breakfast. What's happened?
That cup is actually bigger than your head.
Depends how you see it. So,
Yeah. No, but you sort of held it here, and it's like, whoa, that's breakfast.
yeah, I need a good breakfast to start the day, but it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon because I've been sleeping all day. Yes, and I got some assistance from Tammy because I woke up at 9:30. The church bell ringing. Said, okay, well, it's Sunday, so that's fine for me. They can probably continue without me. And then I woke up at noon again, to my surprise. And then Tammy said, okay, let me get you some tea. So I turned around and I slept again. And then I woke up at 2 o'clock and she said, Harry, I'll massage your feet. And well, I think I slept until 4.
Are you sick? Are you not feeling well?
Now I feel great and even better now.
Well, the foot massage does it.
Yeah, well, the whole resting thing. I sometimes I need a huge rest to reset, and it's very amazing. Yeah, to allow myself. It's basically allow myself space and rest. So that's awesome. There's some kind of natural unblocking, I think.
Yeah, my wife just became a card-carrying CPAP user,
See,
much to my relief. Yeah, there are these machines that it's sort of like when you go to bed, you check into, the ICU. You have to put this mask on your face, and it creates positive pressure. And I suffer from sleep apnea, which is you literally stop breathing.
Mhm.
And I do that literally 59 times an hour.
Okay, great. I think I do that too.
So I'm literally not breathing most of the time. So once I got a CPAP machine, she was able to sleep because I wasn't snoring anymore. And I discovered, the lack of sleep deprivation, like what it means to actually get rest. And so she finally befell the CPAP gods and got diagnosed with much milder apnea than mine, but it was, exhausting her, wiping her out. So
Okay.
she just got her machine a couple of days ago, and she's like, I woke up yesterday morning. I got up at 9 o'clock, and she had cooked popovers and banana nut muffins and two quiches, and she had been up since 6 o'clock, like baking her brains out. She was like, I feel great. And I'm like, so, after eating that stuff, I probably went back to bed for 4 hours because the carbohydrates just took me right off my feet.
Well, great. Hi, Sam.
2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Sam, how are the puppies?
Yeah, check in about the puppies.
I will, in a few minutes, then bring one or more of them to greet you. But boy, they're about, I don't know, they're about twice rat size now, so probably about 3 or 4 pounds. And their eyes are just so inquisitive. They just bore right into you because they're so curious about what's going on. And of course, they're quite cuddly. And so some of them like to be tickled on the tummy, some of them not so much. But it's great. They're all doing really well. All 10 of them have been thriving. So it's been really cool. I got them onto a puppy formula, which I discovered last time around. And that seems to be doing magic for them, because 10 of them is really too much for the mom to handle. And so after about 3.5 weeks, she was having real problems, and plus the teeth are coming in. So formula is really, really working out great. Thanks for asking. In fact, I'll go see if one of them's awake right now.
Les, you want to give us some voice? Or not?
Anyway, they're sleeping soundly, so I'm going to let them sleep for a while. And then when they start making noise, I'll bring one of them over just before I feed them.
Very cool. So what I'd like to do is ask for us to just take 2 minutes in silence, centering up on being here, being present, sort of clearing the boards of whatever we're carrying around on a steady state basis that we can let go of for a minute or two, and just sort of get centered in this space. And I'll start the timer now. And Colin, we're just doing 2 minutes of silence. Boy, that went by fast. Hope it was as good for you as it was for me. And I think we've sort of done kind of generic check-in. So what I'd love to do is open the floor, as is custom first and foremost, for anybody that has a burning desire or a block that has come up in the last week or life. That they'd like to put in the center of the circle. And if not, then I'll fill in the blank. Go ahead, Sam.
So at times, in this group and otherwise, but especially in my personal life this week, there's this notion of someone expressing feelings. So I was asked to listen as someone expressed feelings this week. What came out didn't feel to me so much like feelings. It felt more like blame, attack, anger, a lot of blame. So I'm wondering whether that's something to be expected as part of the norm when someone says they want to talk about feelings, or whether someone just really wasn't really talking about feelings and was talking about something else. And so I'm very curious about when you experience, others experience, or what I should expect it to experience. And I did use the word should. When someone says, I want to express my feelings. And there's a lot more behind that, but that's the general block. Over.
Sam, could you say more about why is this a block for you if somebody does that in front of you?
And also, just in terms of context, the relationship's important.
Yes.
It's critical.
So without going into too many details, some of you know more than others. But there was this difficulty in coming to an understanding. So we wanted to have an understanding conversation. And that's how it was presented and invited. Except that when it got into this understanding conversation, the first thing I was hearing was anger, blame, resentment. And the blame covers a wide variety of things. So I'm thinking, okay, so I can sense frustration, I can sense anger, I can sense resentment, but then all of it, when directed as blame, especially when I don't think that it's grounded in reality, in my reality, I'm going to use my reality here, okay, says how much of that should come out. And if it's coming out for hours and hours, shouldn't it like transition to a different kind of conversation? Or should I just let it go? And at times I lose my patience also. So I get angry. Okay. So I'm just trying to figure out how to handle this, because I've admitted before I have limits to my compassion. I have limits to my love. I have limits to what I can put up with. Not because I'm unwilling, but simply because, there are a lot of other things going on in life. Life is short. Energy is limited. It's not infinite. I would rather move life into a different mode. So that's how I'm trying to experience that.
Can I ask for some clarification around, okay, you're having a conversation with a person, and that person, and as you reframed it as a purpose for understanding each other or understanding a shared situation. So understanding to me is a mental thing. Oh, I understand what's happening. And then you brought it as sharing emotions, which is a different layer.
Yes.
And then you use the word blaming and guilt, which is basically a judgment about how you feel, about how you understand. So then it gets kind of complicated for me. So then I don't know what the fixed point is, but you're the guy I'm looking at. So I'll ask you, why did you have the conversations? What do you need?
We've been wanting to, and we've kind of both used the word an understanding. We wanted to come to an understanding. That was the thing that we've been wanting to have for weeks. And yet,
allow me to interrupt you. To simplify the conversation,
okay,
the other person, I don't know the other person, and the other person not in the room. So I will talk to you about you are having a conversation because
yes,
you want to understand something.
yes, absolutely.
So
I want to understand.
Feel very egoistically, and we support you here, right here. So you want to understand something, and
Yes.
then conversation, this direct question. It feels like the conversation did not bring you what you wanted. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
I feel that it didn't even get to that conversation because my understanding of coming to an understanding conversation is how can we make agreements so that when certain things happen, they don't go sideways, they don't go off the rails. We don't get triggered. We understand what's going on. We know how to move through it. That to me is an understanding.
Okay.
The other person, yeah. Let me just say one more thing before you clarify, okay? Because I think this is important. The other person thought that an understanding conversation was an opportunity to safely just let all her feelings out and express feelings. Okay. So initially, there's already that misunderstanding, which we arrived at only a day later, that we both came in with different assumptions about what a conversation about understanding was about. Okay. So that's why I was hoping to come to agreements with some, preliminary discussion of, what was to be addressed. But the other person came with an intention to share all the feelings and frustrations. And while I can understand that that can drive how we get to an understanding, if it goes on and on for hours and gets angry and gets hateful and gets blaming, then to me, I'm not even motivated to move into a understanding phase. So there's my block. Over.
Yeah, well, the other person, I don't know what you shared the day after, but I hope the other person was happy to be able to show the emotions. And I separate emotions from the blaming and the guilt and all things. That's basically your meaning attached to emotions. I'm angry because blah blah story.
Right.
So I'll skip that and leave that out of our conversation because we are having a conversation about your block, I think. And you said, I want an agreement and I want understanding. And what's the need behind the agreement and understanding, I wonder?
Because otherwise there's this tenuous mode that we're in where we don't know what to expect of each other.
Yeah, well, you just demonstrated that you don't understand what you expect from each other, and you did it once more, it seems.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And to answer your first question, she did not feel happy that she was able to express because she felt that I didn't listen and that I didn't hear. Because after a while, it just got to be too much. And especially when it's attached to all this attacking behavior, and it's grounded, in my opinion, with a detachment from reality, a separation from reality, of course, my reality, and a lack of appreciation for what really has taken place in the past, then I just say, okay, this is not aligned with anything that is true in my life, so it just has no basis.
Okay.
It's where I go. I don't express that, but that's where I go.
You don't express that. Aha. That's also interesting, having an exchange, and you don't express certain things you experience.
Well, there was an exchange. I expressed other things, but not that.
Mm-hmm. So what do you want, Sam?
So I want to understand what expressing feelings looks like. Because I could have said, okay, I understand it all, I accept it all. I could have just been mute. Okay. Or I could have responded to some of the attacks, which I kind of did. Okay. And am looking for best practice or next practice, or what the expectation is when someone says, I want to express my feelings, which, by the way, was never expressed.
Right.
It was expressed as, we want to come to an understanding, but only a day after this blow up did this person say, oh, well, I thought this was a safe time for me to express my feelings.
Right.
But that was never requested.
And was it a safe time for this person to express her feelings?
What?
Well, she said, I assumed that this was a safe time to express my feelings. So,
could have been. Yeah. It could have been up until the attacks happened. Yeah, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, attacks are not our emotions.
In my opinion, they are not. Yes.
Oh, I agree. Do you agree with this person about that distinction?
This person does not agree. This person thinks that all of what she expressed was feelings. So I'm trying to separate the feelings from the attacks. And I'm saying the feelings, yes, I completely am here for you to express the feelings of frustration, of anger, of impatience, and all of that stuff. But once it moves into attack and meaning and, demands and restraints and ultimatums, then I say, okay, those don't feel like feelings to me. Okay. And now my life is trying to be controlled. And that to me is something I get to have a say in. And then when I start saying something about that, then this other person feels not heard and shut down. And by the way, I'm completely okay with this being recorded and shared, but since it involves another person, if I were to divulge more, it would be probably wise to get this other person's consent. Therefore, I'm not disclosing everything at that ultimate detail, which I think you understand. Anyway, I don't want to belabor this point. I just wanted to put it on the table. And if on a one-on-one subsequently, I could have some conversation. Harry, you seem very willing and have some perspective on this. I really enjoy it. I don't demand it. I'm just saying open, because that's what's blocking me on one aspect of life right now. It doesn't need to take too much time here, but I just wanted to put it here. Over.
I'm very open to any approach from you, Sam.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dave. And Sam, Harry's question about what do you want? What's your greatest, deepest desire?
You're starting to sound like Lucifer.
Well,
all right, so you don't watch that TV
that's
show.
interesting. That's interesting that you heard it that way.
Because
Made me laugh.
Lucifer TV show, right?
But what's your greatest, deepest desire?
I want to live
for you,
okay,
in this relationship. And by the way, the details in the story are completely irrelevant.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
So I would like to have a potential to reach what I see as possible. A partnership that is possible, a mutually fulfilling relationship that is possible, one that allows us to do all kinds of things that we're not currently doing now because we're wasting all this time arguing. That's what I would like to see possible. I would also like to see a peaceful, calm, happy household because my daughter is here, okay? And all this crap is happening, and she can hear it. So I want to eliminate that from my daughter's childhood. She heard enough of that, for the last several years.
Doug, just to correct what you said, I'm not that interested in what Sam wants, but what he needs. And that, to me, that's a crucial distinction. I'm currently working from the meaning-making frame, a lot of filters to kind of give meaning to life. Dave is here, so he wrote a whole book about the liminal thinking and the belief model and the self-sealing systems and all that. And I currently, the one I use most, so I know there are more different kind of glasses you can look through at life. And the one that's most helpful to me is going back to the needs, because they're rather universal. And for that I use the work of Marshall Rosenberg. He invented nonviolent communication, but that's all based on understanding the needs. He says all we have is needs, and the rest is strategies to fulfill them. And the conversation Sam just brought to the table as something to look at is these are just different strategies, but both there are two people at the table having a rather specific needs. Sam seems to be kind of to have understanding and reach agreement, so kind of searching for harmony, I would guess. And the other person is now, I want to express myself, even if it's all the shit I'm throwing at you. This is how I feel. These are totally two different approaches. And then when I try to kind of get it to a shared ground of understanding, yeah, then I think, what does Sam need? What does the other person need? And so needs for me are basically a great orientation map to understand what drives people over.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. Thank you. Sorry. So before I respond, Stacy?
Well, I was just going to take this off in a little different of a direction because, you know, every interaction with somebody is really something about ourselves. So I wanted to know from you, what if what she was saying was true? What would that feel like? You know, like you're saying it's not true and whatever. And I'm just wondering if it was, if.
Okay. I will answer that. Okay. If all of that were true, then I would feel that I have brought a lot of unhappiness and frustration to that person's life, and that the best thing for me to do would be to remove myself from her life. That would be the best thing possible if all of those things were true.
I guess I mean, that to me, that's like jumping way far ahead. I guess I was thinking more of within you. Like I'm thinking that part of the reason it escalated is she didn't feel heard. And I'm wondering what makes it hard for you to hear that. Whether it's true or not, just hearing that, I have to imagine that you're emitting something. So even if you're saying, well, I didn't say this, it has to be coming out.
Yeah, right. There are a lot of things where I did say, I didn't say that, I didn't do that. You know, a lot of that did happen. But if it were true, the conclusion is, as I stated in response to your question, I wouldn't want to bring that to anyone.
But would you want to explore why it happened in the first place?
I think the exploration has been happening for years. And I don't think that that exploration, if we continue it, is likely to be very different than the past several years where we've tried to do this. At least by ourselves. Maybe we need some professional help, you know? But as, you know, do-it-yourselfers, no, it hasn't really been that productive. On the other hand, let me also say that in times of sanity, things are extremely good. But those times of sanity are like, you know, 1 day out of 30 or 2 days out of, 90, something like that. And the rest of the time is all this, irritability, frustration, anger, blame stuff. Which, by the way, I mostly try to place in context with history and how this all came about. So I have a lot of compassion in my own mind, in my own heart. I believe I have a lot of compassion around this. If I had no compassion and was really much more selfish, this relationship would have ended long ago. On the other hand, that could be an excuse. That could be the codependency stuff. Okay? On the other hand, I don't really see how, if I'm going to be a compassionate collaborologist, how I can abandon someone. So this abandonment thing is big for me as well. I don't believe in abandonment, because then I'd be just part of, what I'm really railing against.
Then you had your hand raised, and then Tammy, you had blinked in.
Let Tammy go first if she wants.
Okay.
Colin, I'm assuming you're a contextualizer.
Yeah, how'd you guess?
So I'll jump in. I have the privilege of being your friend, Sam. So I first want to say that I know that you've been very devoted and have really, I've witnessed you really do your best. And I also witness you with some self-blame tendencies. And also, from my own experience, it's never about the other person. So I wrote a couple of questions in the chat, but there's patterns that run through each of our lives. And so there's a pattern for you in this relation that is about something. So there's an essential, what I see from my privileged place as your friend is you don't get seen. And so I'm sure there's others. But I'm curious about your perspective of the pattern that this relationship kind of is as a longer frame in your life, and what really pisses you off. Like when you're triggered, what is that trigger specifically? And I think it's not being heard or it's being interrupted. Those things really kind of punch you in the face. And I'm curious as to how you can take your own power back, own what your trigger is, and set some boundaries or some sort of process for you where you're clarifying your limits. And I know that you're already doing that. So because I've seen you and you've checked in with me when you're doing those things. But yeah, so my question is,
Okay.
What's the greater pattern?
So you got many things there, and there's a lot of things I could do, but let me try and do this succinctly. There's 5 very specific things that come up as my triggers / they get turned into boundaries. One is this being interrupted business, okay? And there's different shades of that. There's interruptions that just happen as a matter of course, but then there's real interruptions that happen when something really important is being said. Number 2 is when something I consider very important is laughed off or trivialized by someone else. Okay, that is really triggering for me, especially when it happens repeatedly. Number 3 is when a conversation includes an ultimatum, because then there's no room for co-creation. And ultimatums, just are these rocks that, come up when you're trying to, navigate the ocean. And okay, so number 4 is being told what to do. And then number 5, to me, is just lack of appreciation, lack of gratitude. Those are very triggering for me. And I'm trying to be sensitive to them. And so mostly I've figured out, when that's really happening. We haven't really figured out how to deal with it because it keeps happening. Now, there are many, many other patterns, but those are the triggers. And then they, recur in patterns, and we try to stop them, and I try to propose things, and these agreements don't seem to hold. And that's, again, a frustration. So I'm trying to put it as short and succinct as possible, but obviously each of those is a big topic. By the way, if other people have blocks, this has already been discussed a lot, and there's enough that I can actually take offline. So I don't want to derail or monopolize this conversation, but I just wanted to say, hey, here's one thing. And I am really, really personally curious as to the way I first posed the question, which is when someone or when you say, I want to express my feelings, what does that look like? How does that feel? What's included, what's out of bounds, what's in bounds, what's fair, what's not fair. How long should it go? All of that. Okay.
Okay. Can I try to answer this as a question asked to me? Harry, how do you express your feelings?
Perfect.
Well, you got a beautiful new litter of dogs there. They demonstrate it. When they are in pain, they cry. When they're happy, they're happy. They waggle their tails. I don't have a tail, but this particularly what the Harry I try to get back to. Then when I'm angry, then I dare to show it without the block. Or when I'm sad, I dare to show it without the block. When I'm happy, similarly, dare to show it without the block. And culturally, those blocks are different. Being happy is okay. Being sad is meh, and being angry is not accepted. So these are all, but I'm basically practicing to honor my own feelings and allow myself, without considering the other, to feel them first and secondly express them. And also in conversations about exchange of, people want to share their emotions. That's that's where all my personal work and all the therapy and workshops and all bullshit has helped me a lot to find frames and ways and patterns to exchange them without making it a battle or whatever. And there's a lot of confusion, and that resonated to me about you sharing. I want to exchange my emotion, and it's about understanding. It has nothing to do with each other. Nothing for me. Also, my ex-wife, she said, I want to understand why you feel the way and all that. They're going like it's a rabbit hole, as you call it. So this is how I would do it. Thank you. Over.
Thank you. Can I ask one follow-up question, which is, when you're expressing feelings, is it okay? Do you allow yourself to use the word you a lot?
My feelings, I cannot feel about you, Sam. I can say I love you, I like you, I hate you. Yes, I could do it that way, but I try to avoid it as far as I consciously can, because my feelings are my feelings. The way I experience any impressions could be, a bat hitting me or a person hitting me. I feel pain, and I feel anger. It's a signal. Emotion to me is a signal. It's not a relational thing. And of course, you can talk about causes and effects with the people. Is because you act this way, I feel that way. Mm-hmm. But making the other responsible for what I feel is basically loss of sovereignty, autonomy, and everything I've been striving for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to unpack something, because our feelings, the emotional mechanism that we have inside, is not of thought process. It's not of intellect. It's of reaction and response on an embodied basis. And blame isn't about feelings, it's about intention. So a teacher of mine had a saying, which is, you can either be right or you can be close. And I think, the classic question is, to what degree, on a percentage basis, are you responsible for creating closeness and intimacy in your relationship? So how would you answer that right now?
Okay, I will also unpack that into intention and action. Okay, intention is 100%. Okay, my action is a result of what I'm observing and feeling myself, okay, in the moment.
So what's that percentage?
That percentage, can go to zero, okay?
Right.
Because I don't want to be anywhere near that much violence and pain and blame and hatred.
Understood. So check this out. So generally people will hedge. It's sort of like, I'm 50% responsible. You just said it can go to zero. I'm not responsible at all, right? So anything.
No, the action part, I would take note.
Understood, but But at the end of the day, on a responsibility basis, I'm 100% responsible for creating closeness, connection, and intimacy in my marriage. And if I am reserving any of that percentage or eliminating it completely, regardless of, facet or distinction you want to make facet-wise,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm really doing is reserving the right to be right over being close.
How about reserving the right to be in a sanctuary or in a serene mode, as opposed to having that violence around?
Well, you're speaking to the effect and the result of the dynamic of the
That's exactly
dynamic
what I want
of a relationship and power struggle, right? But at root, the power struggle is about, I want to be right. No, I want to be right. No, I want to be right.
You're
And
very soft, by the way, Doug.
the power struggle is rooted in who wants to be more right over being close in any given point. And your question about feelings is that feelings have nothing to do with being right or wrong. They are. So the 99% of the truth and the reality and the situation from your other's framing of, I thought this was going to be about feelings, at root is, I thought I was going to be heard. Now, the piece of the puzzle with that I think I have a slight variation with Harry on, I don't think it's an underlying substantive disagreement, but it's a slightly different contextualization. The only thing I put under the needs category is food, water, and either shelter or clothing, depending upon climate. Those are the only things human beings need to survive. Everything else is in the want category. And the reason for making that distinction is because everything that is in the want category is a function of our individual choice and intention and desire and ask, in terms of the resultant of whatever our actions are, whatever our words are, we get what we ask for. So when Tammy raised the triggers and you listed the 5 triggers, if you were to take those 5 and instead of looking at them as triggers, as events that happen that trigger a response, you looked at them as a hidden goal and asked, like, I'm looking for this kind of shit to hit me. Not be heard, be interrupted, da 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 da. And you take the judgment out of whether that makes sense, is good or bad or rational or not. But you just look at it as an unconscious ask. And then you go one layer deeper and go, what's behind those things? Like, what do those things make you feel? Right? Which is all the stuff embedded in the effect of being triggered. Those feelings are where the action is, right? And if you have embedded beliefs about who Sam is and or fears, Sam has embedded fears about whether Sam is getting heard, whether Sam is being respected, acknowledged, recognized. All of the back end sort of truths underlying why those things would be triggered, right? It's a generative cycle of recreation. If we get what we ask for, then what you got into in that exchange, if you look at it through the lens of, I don't like it, but what's operating in me that might be asking for that? Because it affirms me in my sense of right. It affirms me in my sense of, you know, why I have to defend me, why I have to fight for me, why I have to stand up, why I have to have limits and all of the rest, right? If that's an inside job, then what people I've seen do is we cast somebody as our significant other to do just that. we literally put out a casting call. I want somebody who's going to set me up to have this go on in my relationship. Because if this is going on in my relationship, it's affirming core beliefs and fears that I have. It affirms the truth of them. And it's it's an unbelievably difficult thing to like take all the judgment out and all the fog and confoundment and confusion of feelings and blame and accusations and all of this stuff. You know, there's all this chaotic mixing and matching. But if you unpack it and break it down and distill it from an individual personal responsibility ownership place, like if I am getting exactly what I'm asking for, why would I be asking for that? How would I be generating that? How am I responsible for what I'm on the receiving end of? Then it changes the whole view and perspective. Because it's no longer I'm being hit from this from the outside, and that from the outside, and this from this person, and that from that person. And I'm just on the receiving end of all this incoming, and that's what's calling the shots and determining my responses and what I do and all that. Where it's just being reactive and responsive to. If I own that, then why did I cast this person in my life for this purpose? And why am I engaged in this activity? You know, that is like completely antithetical to what I love and am passionate about doing in my life. And why, you know what I mean? It's like all of these things ultimately are reflections of choices we make.
Right.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out as a counterpoint.
Yeah, I really am open to that, but this is the kind of thing which I believe, okay, I can't do on my own. Okay, because I asked those questions already for years. So I'm very willing to consider that. And I believe I'm willing to let loose of all of that. In fact, very willing.
Listen, there's nothing like getting sick and tired of being sick and tired of like, I've been on this hamster trail before.
So anyway, that's maybe a placeholder for another conversation. But yeah, I don't think there's misunderstanding, but there's not inherent unwillingness to do that. So I definitely want to explore that because what happens in this pattern that I've just described for the last year or so is untenable. It's not sustaining. It's not healthy. It's not productive. It takes away time from everything else I want to do. So, you know, when you reframe Harry's needs as wants, I can still place a lot of what I need in those wants because, you know, that way to just, you know, have food, shelter, whatever, you know, a lot of the wasted time threatens my capacity to keep providing for myself and my family, which then will address the food and shelter and warmth and clothing and all that sort of business. And it's very direct. It's already happened to some very measurable extent. So it's not simply distinguishing needs and wants. You know, I do see that. I do see that, you know, if I was completely, you know, okay with the needs, I would make much less of this. But it is threatening those needs. So That's why, to me, it's a block. And I just wanted to bring it up as an item, not to resolve, but to perhaps get some perspective and possibly some connections and, placeholders for future conversations. And to, demonstrate being an imperfect human being. Very willing to be a guinea pig. Slug.
Thank you for the generosity in that.
Anyway, I hear some puppy noises. I'm going to bring one of them out and then I'm going to go feed them. But thank you very much for this feedback. Okay.
Colin, you had your hand raised. Did you want to?
I was generally going to speak with Sam too, Sam. I could share generally, but I think I'll pass it this time.
Dave, we haven't heard your voice. Do you want to
Hi.
check in?
Hello.
Hello,
Hello, hi.
hello.
Sounds you haven't been speaking a lot, Dave. Kind of thing.
Hello.
We cornered him on that one yesterday at the barn raising, and he had a good answer that he could repeat. I suppose I think what we're trying to do is find more upfront intentions of sharing, so that people don't have to guess what we're up to so much, or have more of an idea of how to help, perhaps, as well, or how to align. So if we kind of know what people's intentions are, or what they're interested in, I think early on in this group, one of the paths I was following was with William Charlton about trying to find a way to propose things, because if you can propose something, that means you understand something, or you think you understand it, and so you're kind of on the other side of the coin that Sam's talking about. If you start proposing things to each other, as opposed to pushing against each other, that's a human emotional playground. And they say about love, it's blind. So the ways of the heart are hard to put into logic. And anyway, so it's not surprising that someone as logical as Sam would have a hard time trying to wrestle with these things. I've been down that road too. So I guess what I'm trying to say, to get back to my earlier point, was the other side of the coin of this disagreement or understanding, or how can you be in a position where you can be generous to the other person, to actually respect and listen to them. I think Doug read it. Person looks to be respected, acknowledged, and understood. Is that the mantra, Doug? Yeah. Can't hear you.
For the most part, just people desperately need to be heard.
Yeah. So, and when you're feeling like somebody has already made up their mind about you due to your actions, or them pulling up history and not going into the future, there's all kinds of different framing of the stuckness or the block. Like we could draw many pictures of what the block looks like, and would not 90% of them be human constructed things? And the things that are not human, the facts, we can't really argue with the fact. Well, I shouldn't say that. People try to argue that. People will be people. So what tools or symbols or memes can we respectfully reach for to try to be better understood? And I think part of it is in the learning to disagree better, because it may be that you could save a lot of beating around the bush by knowing that you're incompatible with somebody or some ideals. as you can't please all the people all the time. So which of those people are the ones we can't please? And if we're trying to please them, then it's an act in frustration. And if we fall in love with that person, well, you've really got your hands full then. So, and I think it's not as black and white as that, but the idea is, if you can go to be understood, if you can be heard, so be understood, what tools can we and agents can somebody use in their toolbox to help them, emotionally, but not irrationally? I don't think you can't take all the emotion out of it, the why and the what and the purpose, but there's things that there must be, some things that we can do to discern that the other person isn't willing to have that discussion right now. So it's, they say don't have a discussion in the heat of the moment, wait till it cools off. So there's one tool. So, 2 hours, it maybe should, 30 minutes should be enough that anyone can download on somebody else in a loving relationship, and realize that, if it's really getting that verbally violent, there must be a way you can say, no, what is it that you really are trying to say? And why am I not hearing it? And I guess that's the point. Are they hearing it? I think Doug, hit the nail on the head when he come back and got back onto the feelings kick, because that is where all the action is, how they feel, their biases, facts be damned. So when you get to actually appreciating and respecting the facts, you're kind of moving away from the emotional realm and saying, well, let me open my mind and consider the possibilities. I think Stacy mentioned that. Like, can you look at the other side of this? Could she have been right? Or, how could we reframe this? And Doug saying, how could we reframe this? But emotions don't allow you really to reframe well. So I think those are the essence of having moving forward in a conversation or a discussion. Conversation over a longer period of time, obviously. Discussions are kind of events that happen. Say, I'd like to discuss something in a longer conversation over years. How do you track that and see who's actually been fair and gracious and who's actually being the bully, as it were? And I think, again, it's not black and white. I think we can all do better, and I think Sam may be right to cast that in front of other people and get their opinion can help. But the only person who knows what it feels like and can fix it is the people that are involved, really. And to have those people go to somebody professional could be a thing to do. And so that heat. And I think I'll just say one last thing. A very similar and a GCC kind of cookie cutter of this would be the discussion between Sam and Doug on how do we disagree, or how do we disagree better, or are those the right terms to even use? Is that the right discussion? Is that the right topic of the discussion that they would have? And how could we, go through that and look for some of these tools, as opposed to trying to be right? We could get into, finding out the essence of what each person actually means by that. Because just to lay it out in a few minutes, it's a whole lot of emotion trying to, like what is it, the whale trying to come through the straw. It just doesn't work well. So, and I think that back pressure can really give you that feeling of lack of understanding. So how do you, I just thought that'd be interesting, and we did talk about that on yesterday, Glenn and I, about putting something together. Sam would like something put together that sort of like a Doug talks to Sam about the higher meaning of conversation and how can we have better conversations, and what happens when disagreements come up, and maybe we can pull out some of these difficult things from the blockings and whatnot, and highlight them, because I think it's quite a common thing, common enough to be human and not be able to feel understood. And I think that's the big trigger, right? Especially when you know you're being bullied because the person's just egging you on and pushing your buttons. It's just, you know, that person you shouldn't be talking to, you should know that right off the button, you know, right off the bat, that they're not ready to have that discussion. So how do we get those emotional intelligence tools so that we can move on to the real conversation? You know, that's what I feel in this group. That's the game. And so what Sam was discussing earlier was, you know, how do we set up this game so we can have this discussion or this conversation? So what are the pieces in the game? And some people don't like the word game, but experiment sounds even colder. so intelligent framing of the real-time situation. How's that? I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
One of the things that, at least for me, I've been dealing with is that I think we need to recognize that not everybody is at the same level or has the same ability to listen or to express. And I think it's important to understand, like I know for me, so many times my frustration has grown out of the mistaken belief that somebody does have the ability and was choosing not to hear me the way I needed to be heard or expressed to me. And it's been a real it's been a real shift to recognize that they just don't have it in them. And you know, sometimes I can find it within myself to recognize they don't have that and I could be there for them. And other times I have to say, I'm not strong enough to put myself in that position where I'm giving 75% because I'm going to tip over.
That's a really big piece in this, I think, Stacy, that you're highlighting. And you can unpack it because there are a lot of dimensions to that. There's my perception of you and on a incoming basis, like what you share with me. Then add on top of that, my judgment of you in terms of your capabilities or lack thereof, or biases, or fill in the blank. And in relation to that, how much self-awareness do I have of the judgment layer that I'm putting on top of the base layer of just receiving the signal? And then there's the what's my choice and decision and intention in putting something out, whether it's in response, in opposition, in whatever, in relation to what you've shared with me. And how much consciousness and awareness, self-awareness do I have of what I'm doing when I open my mouth or when I take action? And it's actually a really, really, really complicated signal processing dance. Now, take all of that and put underneath it is my starting premise state of being on a feeling and emotional level rooted in fear or love. And that's something that I would suggest is a dimension of on arrival. Like, I think in the natural world, you know, an animal is sort of at neutral and they, in the moment, react like fight or flight, or this is cool and safe and I can lay down and nuzzle, right? I think human beings are really capable of getting stuck in fear and arriving with that rather than making that decision in the moment. But either or, the net effect is the same, which is the underlying driver of all of that stuff on top in terms of how I process the incoming and what my judgments are and what I think of you and what I think in my own process and all that stuff is either in service to affirming that I have a reason to be afraid or affirming that I feel safe and good and this is a warm and fuzzy thing that I'm in. And it's like that's like a really complicated soup that, you know, most people don't even think about. It's just this, you know, sort of primitive, reactive, in the moment, almost instinctual, you know, interaction on a real-time basis, moment to moment, with a lot of playing of the past forward out of habit and reflex. And that thing about imputing intention to somebody because they have an ability we're perceiving and attributing to them that they may not even have. And then we blame them for intentionally not using the ability that we've imputed to them. And in the meantime, they're sitting there and they're not party to any of that stuff. It's all on us. It's all on me doing that to them. So, yeah. It's complicated, and I think part of being here is about taking these things apart and being able to look at them and talk about them and, you know, kick them around. And Colin, I don't know whether that maps to, you know, being able to codify anything as much as it's about getting inside the practice and then discovering from the inside out whether there's anything that we could extrapolate and put up to other people and say, this is the learning.
Yeah, that is what I was kind of getting at. And not thinking that trying to set up a format of mapping a discussion where people try to, you know, get to the heart of the matter, the essence. I'm not thinking that they'll actually succeed, but I think that two people who are willing and are serious and giving can get a long ways to being understood and better knowledge of where you may disagree and where you may have work to do. You know, I've said several things, and I've got these little sort of like moments of learning from saying things and getting pushback on certain words I've used. And I see that going on, and I see when that happens, there's a lesson for everybody in that. So whether it may, or, you know, I shouldn't say everyone, for a lot of people, especially in this type of a forum where we're speaking to each other, but there could be potentially a lot of people wanting to see a follow-up on a certain thread that we've had. How do they get that satiated? How do we know that they want that thread followed up on? So that's part of the mapping, is to make it a little bit more feedback interactive for the people involved and potentially for a group like this for a greater understanding as well. I really do appreciate the idea of not barking up the wrong tree, as you say, Doug, trying to make people into things that they're not, or that you envision them to be, or imbuing them with certain skills that they don't have, and then asking them why you can't do it. You know, parents do that to their children. Why can't you be a football star like your dad? Or whatever, that's the meme, right? You know, so, or be in the army, I guess. So I guess finding these little examples that we can extrapolate on and actually use, I think would be a good thing. So when you see one, you could put it like in the to-do pile. We could start a little sprout on this discussion over this word or over this disagreement or misunderstanding. I've kind of got that map already started. And I would like to develop that a little bit farther. And I welcome you and Sam to be interested in that and help co-develop that. Because no, I'm not thinking that it's something that's going to come to a result, but it is a work in progress. And back to the point of efficiency, you could stop a conversation really quick if you got the right tools. Like a conversation going off rails, there's no need to fight for hours. If somebody needs to have an emotional download, then they might need, like they might need a big hug from Harry instead. You know what I mean? Like that might have worked better than a 2-hour download. I don't know. Maybe they would have hit you if you tried to hug them. I don't know. But for example, if I want to have a discussion with somebody who has a different worldview than me, it may be over before it started. So there's nowheres to go on. We could point out to each other how ridiculous we think each other's worldview is, but where is that getting us? So I find it really interesting to follow conversations where people are willing to have that discussion about their worldviews, but not in the conflict sense, in debates that are convivial. But I'd rather not have a debate either, now that I've become a little bit more, given a little bit more thought to this. If somebody wants to push back against you, you're already got one hand behind your back. So that's the point. And if they don't, and if they're thinking in black and white and they're not willing to look at nuance, again, the conversation may be over. And the more you try to split hairs or add context, the more you may be falling into their trap of being somebody who is insensitive, when really what they needed was a hug. So there's this disjointness, I think, that at the very beginning. And that's kind of why, before you propose what it is you want to say, you have to get to the place to propose it. So I think a lot of the human work is, how do you bring people to that map? How do they find the map and then start contributing to it, as opposed to just expecting that everybody's going to start using the map, right? So that's that human adapter layer that's so important. And I think that's where this group really gives me a lot of pause and for thought. And so, we could take some of these gems and run with some of these things the way I see it. Now, I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but I keep trying to follow with this theme of laying out the trail of the conversation. And I think you need to do it a little bit more methodically than just after the fact. So maybe harvest some ideas, put them out there, get people to agree that these are generally in the right place. Now let's start moving these puzzle pieces around and tell you what I really think about this, in a way that can be visually juggled with in your mind. Your mental gymnastics are enhanced by having it on the map, I guess is the point. Your memory is there. And you can see that person is going back to blaming you over here on square number 5. I thought we agreed that we wouldn't get into the blaming game. Let's go back over here to where we agree we want to move this branch forward. And that's probably what therapists do. They help keep you going in a positive direction, as opposed to a destructive direction. I don't know. I don't know what size and what time and what kind of space is required, but I do know a place like this is contemplating it. Anyway, thanks.
If I may. I know mapping is important for you, Colin, and it's part of my professional life as well, and so is it for Dave. So it's an interesting frame, once more. And I don't really understand what you talk about, like the map. I know you do these trail recordings, and they form a kind of map together. I just want to put next to it without trying to compare, but when I try to understand what I do when I am mapping with clients, I build the map collectively. And what it does to me, I use a whiteboard and start drawing what we want to see. And I mostly draw people because it's all about people. And then you draw the context or the constellation, or basically that's what I visualize. And what I noticed is that if we are doing that, we do it because we all want to have better insight about the topic at hand. And what it does automatically, it literally puts the noses in the right direction towards the topic at hand. And if we look at from the outside, because we look at the same whiteboard and we talk about the topic and not about whether your contribution is more valuable than mine. All we can do is we can look at it. Does this make sense? Is it more meaningful when we do it like this? Or is there other contradictions or white spots? So that's how I do my work. And in that, my experience is, and that's my reason for sharing it, that the ego or the blaming is not part of the discussion anymore. It's about finding a shared way of looking, shared perception, I would say. Over.
Yeah, and I think the antithesis to that is the bullying and the lying, right?
I cannot imagine myself doing this with somebody who's bullying and lying. He might be, but then the image would probably be a mess, and the conversation would be very uncomfortable, and I probably I will not be ready to that. Imagine you and I would try to make some kind of thing, and we will start bullying each other and blaming. Hey, Colin, this is totally wrong what you said about this and that. Well, that's not even a conversation to me anymore. So in my work, basically people do it because they are driven by the need or want, whatever, that they want to understand something. And if
yeah, no, I think I agree with what you're saying, Harry, totally. I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. Yeah. What I'm saying is, it's you're presenting a pleasant, coexistence type of a mindset. You want to coexist or be giving, or you want to help out. You're part of a positive flow, could say. Where what I'm saying is a lot of these conversations that you think are happening may not actually be happening. So those are the ones. There's many different kinds. So you say, what do these maps do? Well, there's many different kinds. So you're doing it more like a project type of a map, making a project plan, maybe grabbing some library information as well. I don't know if you include that as well. That's more of a SAM type of thing. And also you have like the 30,000 foot view too. So there's we can use a map for a memory of information. You can use it to present ideas like in a project or whatever. And you can also make like a timeline and, again, it's like a project thing. And I'm kind of looking at all three of them. So what I look at my map is basically, depending on whether it's a note-taking tool for studying, it's kind of like a journey of knowledge that way. But it's basically a logical playground where you can put things where you want them to be so you might not lose them or forget them and be able to refer to it. Making the abstract concrete, really. Saying, I have an idea, I feel this particular way, and you put it on the map. And then it stays there. It doesn't disappear. Like 5 minutes later in the conversation, it's still there, right? So it's sort of like a progression of the exploration. It's an exploration of the understanding, where you're not saying. I think Doug was mentioning that, and maybe you were getting to the fact that you do it together, so that it's not like I come in with a finished map and say, here's the rules. This is what it should be. It's more like an exploration. So it's kind of like you do it together, and therefore you have to have an understanding of what the map represents. You have to be able to transfer, get around on the map. So simply, if you have a conversation map, without getting too far into this, it would be, you'd have to have, I see it a bit of like a game where you have a rule set where you pleasantly move forward, and probably similar to how you would try to put the next thing on the map that you're drawing with your, a company's easy because they do have that emotion removed for the most part, and they do have an objective that they're trying to do together. And so everybody's kind of already ticked off most of the boxes to sit down and have a positive conversation, where some other conversations are very difficult, like the one Sam was talking about with his block. So I'm saying, like, once you got through the weeds of what Sam's experiencing, maybe they could have more of a kind of a map like you're talking about. And that's what I was kind of trying to propose between Sam and Doug about, just doing an example of trying to disagree pleasantly about semantics of certain terms that have been disagreed on in the past. And maybe there's quickly we'll find there is no disagreement. That's the goal, to be understood, right? Steel man the other person's position. Let them define things. Like, what do you mean by this? Glenn and I had quite a long session, and I have a hard time following Glenn. So it was really fun to have that opportunity. And I learned a lot going through that. So I have a few ideas of how this can go wrong and how you might have to participate in this to get something out of it. So I haven't really presented that to people. But I'm hoping that you'll understand, it'll be more obvious that, we're going to basically be putting what we think in a two-dimensional plane, that we're going to grow ideas towards understanding. And we're going to negotiate what that understanding is, depending on whose branch you're following at a particular time. And the whole idea is to make the conversation visible, so it doesn't get bulldozed, bullied, or you can say, I didn't mean that. Also, a great thing that I find in the difficult conversations, when somebody holds you to what you said, you say, well, that's what I may have said, but that's not what I mean. And then when they won't let you change what it is you actually mean and get to the nuance, they're not really having a discussion with you. They're trying to win. They're trying to have a debate. They're trying to call you a liar. They're being very adversarial. And so I'm thinking like a buzzer should go off when that happens. It's like, you're being a bully, right? Like they shouldn't be allowed to use that emotion and that bullying. They could say truths like, you really hurt me because you did this. Like, that's valid, right? But to start accusing people of stuff, I get into conversations where, they're difficult. People start accusing you of stuff that you haven't done, and it's just what they have in their mind, and it just starts to download. If this is somebody you really care about, you want to clear up that misunderstanding, I just think it would be nice to be able to show them what was just said. And maybe they don't, a lot of times people look at it and say, I don't care what was just said because it was all emotion. Just throw that away. I'm sorry about all that. It doesn't mean anything. But in the heat of the moment, it's almost like they'll never realize what they're saying. They'll never have that self-reflection, I think is what Doug is talking about. And if they don't have the skill to have that conversation, that's a hard one too. So,
Bang on.
yeah.
So here's
Doug and Sam have the skill to have that conversation.
So here's a sort of a share of the progression question, from how I've been, feeling it in any conversation, exchange, or collaboration. And I'm beginning, it's sort of strange because I'm beginning to see it more as energy flows first. So like I arrive at moment zero with my time and attention as a threshold energy ante that I'm putting on the table. And somebody else is sitting across from me and they're similarly situated, arriving same. So there's already been an intention and commitment to share that moment, for me to devote my attention and focus on them and vice versa. And so the threshold question is it safe? Like, am I able to do that from a place of ease and comfort and openness and generosity and engagement and no reserves, no holding back, no worries or qualifications, suspicions, or questions. And what I just said is a really big deal in and of itself. Because I think in the world we live in, for most people, they don't arrive in a place of neutral in that. They arrive set up to be ready to defend themselves or to protect themselves or to fight or flee, right? Like there's the natural set point in the current cultural paradigm, which I don't believe is the natural setup for human being, is one of trepidation, of sort of low-grade anxiety. Am I safe? Is this person cool to engage with? And so in that moment alone, my experience is people arrive with all sorts of patterns and habits of how they enter the room, how they show up. It can be, this is who I am and what I've accomplished. And it can be, my identity is what I do, or my identity is what I know, or variations on sort of an introductory dance. And each person sort of goes through that reflexively. There isn't necessarily a consciousness to that. It's just sort of like what they do when they arrive into a new situation, a new connection, collaboration, sharing environment, whatever. And within 15 seconds, huge amounts of automated judgmental responses are triggered in other people. And the soup is immediately both foggy, muddy, and complicated. With all of that, before there's been any exchange of anything, and it's not about judging, for me, it's not about judging any of that. It's about, okay, so I know I'm arriving from a place of generosity that says, I am ready to listen to all of that, receive all of that for as long as it takes from anybody and everybody present and accounted for until those initial dances are done. But the guy sitting to my right may be like, this is bullshit, I'm out of here. And the person to my left is, I was good until person number 3 stepped up and shared, and I just hate them. Like, there's some reason or button pushed for me to judge the crap out of them. And so is it possible to either in the invitation or in the contextualization and setup, is it possible to relieve either the pressure for people to do that, or where they're not conscious of it, minimize and shorten the amount of time required for them to get through it and be heard and feel safe? Because ultimately all that stuff is about somebody getting situated and getting to a place where they feel safe. They've been heard, they've been recognized, acknowledged, they've gotten their stuff out, and it's okay. And they genuinely, legitimately it's okay. Like they have felt, heard, honored, acknowledged, recognized. And we haven't even gotten to like, what are we here for? Like before you even get to like, what are we here for? What are we doing here? What's the intention, purpose, joint endeavor, goal, output, whatever. I'm like in those weeds. And I'm not stuck in those weeds. But what I really feel is that those are the weeds that if you just sort of say, well, we don't have time for any of that and we don't care about it. We've got to get to the business at hand. Those are the weeds that come back sooner or later down the road to hurt realization of the maximal generative potential of all of the people present and accounted for. Achieving whatever it is was the common theme that they came together to achieve. And I'll stop there, but I just want to calibrate it from where I experienced the beginning, like, step 0, and I'm complete.
I want to just bring up the safety part of it because it attaches to something that's really been very present for me. And at least for me, when I assess safety, I'm making assumptions about different people based on input that they have given to me. And what I recognize that maybe we need to really look at is that not everybody is as careful with the word that they use. Like Colin mentioned before, he might have said something and then somebody says, but you said that before, and get over it. But you can't, because that word, you said the word, I assumed you meant the word. And if you didn't mean the word, then go back and say, you know what, I rethought that. I don't really mean this. Because if somebody's giving you information and you're using that to make your judgments, and then you find out the information's inaccurate, like, then what? And, I watched a couple of videos before I went to sleep yesterday, and one, I guess it was I don't know what integral theory is, but I guess it was about integral theory because that was the last layer. And I'm losing, basically, the one piece that I think is missing is that it's not easy for us to say what we really mean or feel. And I think that somehow we have to make it safe for people to say that. I mean, even in some of these conversational communities, the minute there's a disagreement, oh, you got to get out. We don't want to deal with that here. Well, if somebody's acting out because they're feeling a sense of separation, and your treatment of that is to separate them, that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, thanks, Stacy. There's many shades of or colors of misunderstandings. One could be you use the wrong word, or it could be that you disagree on the meaning of a word. So I could say exactly what I meant, use the words I intended to mean, and you could take it a whole different way. Another thing is there may be an onion of conversations being imagined out of a seed of a conversation. So what is the prototype, the end goal? And that might be misassumed as well. Where we're going with this, who's going to do it, a bunch of assumptions. So I don't know. One of the trigger words I was talking about that I learned from was assumptions or expectations. And Sam was the one who popped that one out there. He says, well, and then he uses today, well, it wasn't what I expected. So, it is a nuance. I don't like to be interrupted. when I'm saying something very important, or I don't like to be laughed at because that's interrupting my seriousness, right? Like they're interrupting the moment with laughter. So was that laughter intentional is in disagreement, or was it nervous laughter? So these levels of misunderstanding is why you have to put the time into the conversation and unpack it. And you have to have people who are willing to be wrong and to learn, not people who already assume they know the answer and why don't you see? Because that's not a conversation, that's not a discussion, that's a lecture. And it's guilt, and it's blaming, and it's preaching over instead of with, or whatever they call. And I see that in a lot of difficult conversations, and unfortunately it's one of the ones I'm drawn to as well, to see how that difficult conversation can actually be had. Like, I've found the nicest way to end a religious conversation is just to say, I believe what I believe, thank you very much, and that's the end of it. Because if you start to apologize, as in the intellectual apologizers trying to explain why this would have happened, you're just starting an argument on things that can't be proven, outside the fact zone, totally inside the emotion zone. Like, how do you map where you're standing on this conversation? It's very slippery ice conversation. So just to agree to disagree, and that it's a matter of faith, you can accept that it's a matter of somebody's faith. You don't have to agree with their faith, but you can respect that they have that faith. And if they're using authority with that faith, then it gets into more the public sphere. If it's a personal thing, then have at it, right? It's their personal beliefs. You may not, depending on what other things you have in common with that person, you may decide that that's a showstopper for a relationship. It's just not going anywhere. They're going to shame me all the time, or we never talk about it. It's funny, you'd never think that we'd be friends, but we're the best of friends. So it comes in all different flavors, shapes, and sizes. It does come down to the willingness to understand the other, or wanting to understand the other. Some people just like light conversations. I think I do much better when I don't overthink the conversation too much. I think I have a lot friendlier interactions at the ball game when we're talking about, guys' scores and how hard he threw the ball and all these super important things, that are in a friendship. Perhaps just discussing your experience, not really trying to understand why you're in the art zone then, right? So are you dealing with facts? Are you dealing with art? Are you dealing with emotion? Are you dealing with logic? Are you dealing with a conversation that has to be had, that's important? Or are you just pushing your conversation onto somebody? Are you dealing with somebody without the skill to have this conversation? And what tools can we avail each other to have the best footing to understand the other and have a decent conversation? I guess that's what it's coming down to. And the crayon version of that is my maps, I guess. Thanks.
Tim?
I appreciate these ruminations. They expand what I think I originally brought, but I'd like to expand it even further. One is that I've heard other people here, and I myself believe, that there are different levels of skill and sensitivity and awareness that are brought to conversations. And the analog is, almost every other domain. There's skills to be acquired before you're actually competent in those domains, whether it's law, software engineering, medicine, whatever the heck it is, teaching. And in conversation, you could think of different skills there as well. It is probably always the case that no two people in any conversation have the same set of skills, or even the same understanding of those skills. In software engineering, there's a phenomenon called the blog. Not blog, sorry. I forget what the word was. Not blog. But it's this notion where what I understand is the sum total of all that needs to be understood. And, therefore you actually see the gaps in skill set for those who don't have the skills that you do, but you don't see your own gaps from the perspective of someone who has more experience and more skills than you do. So what I have attained in my skill set is enough to make me, masterful, enlightened, expert, all this sort of thing, if one is not careful with one's perspective in that conversation. But you could say if you put a dimensional plot of these skill sets, people who are just starting out, let's say 3-4-year-olds, okay, they would have some small set of skills, and someone who's probably an ancient elder or a counsel, wise person would have, be put on a different dimension. The people on the, let's say, more elementary end of the spectrum are less aware, probably not at all aware of this phenomenon. And so there is a question how much to engage and how much one can expect from these conversations, especially if you don't know this person well. But if you do know this person well, that can be dangerous also, because then that turns into a lecturing, educational kind of moment, which is not what the other person wants. So all of this adds to the complexity. You can argue with this model, but if you take a look at any other domain, you can probably see that there are different levels of skills and different discrete skills that are involved. So what I'm trying to figure out, and this is a key question of collaborology, and I'm interested because I'm not expert in this, is how do you deal with this? How do you expose it? How do you behave? How do you recommend? How do you bring yourself to engagements or collaborations or even conversations, knowing at some point that this is in place?
I think it's through establishing a type
I'm not
of.
expecting an answer, by the way.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about this, and it's like how governments try to do it. They have a certain, there's a certain format to engage. They have hard conversations that they have to have. Again, I assume this is a conversation that needs to be had. So through experience and trying it, and that didn't work, well, we can't just kill each other. Well, let's go back to government day number 2, government day number 3. Like, okay, well, the kings are wrong. We killed each other. Let's try again. Government day number 12, government, So eventually you get a standard, a traditional way of trying to discuss things. And whether that way is good or bad may come down to authority or power. And that's what I'm trying to get to with, dogma and stuff. That's an authority of the past that was decided, burn the witches, whatever. So that's not the way to do it. So we're kind of come to a new space saying, okay, well, we've got all this experience. We know that it's complicated. How do we make a new game so that, maybe the beta version could be conversations that we set up and have and try to negotiate with each other, knowing that we want to have successful conversations. That's even difficult. So, and I think that's where you want to keep it, because as soon as because that's where you want to get people to on the other side of the coin from pushback and emotional, I'm just going to download on you. At that point you say, okay, well, let's stop having this conversation and let's listen to you and see what it is. I've been in conversations where I'm trying to analyze, be logical, and all the other person wanted was just to be listened to, right? So, so you say, well, guess what? I'll put the game away, and we'll have that emotion. We'll try the game again tomorrow, and move ahead, because it's very important for me to play this game. Or if somebody says, well, they make your game into something it's not, then it's difficult. So I think it's through showing, through example. So if Doug and Sam could give an example of how to have a good conversation and have it mapped, 30-minute conversation of some sort, I don't know, with a pre-agreed upon game board to try to define terms so that you're actually defining and speaking about the same terms, and show people the difficulty to actually, it could be a long time just to set the game board up. And that's the whole point of steel manning, right? So people try to run to the end of the finish line and wave the flag when the game isn't really even set up properly. So,
I know Tammy wanted to talk. I'll just say real quickly in answer to Sam's question, though, that I think starting by finding the largest common agreement is a good place to start. It seems like we go, like, for example, I know Colin's been in a lot of religious kind of conversations, and Sam too, and it seems we have science, we have religion, and we leave out the middle common sense part, you know, and instead of like starting from the middle and seeing, well, this is the way I see life around me working, where might there be some commonalities coming from both sides? But in any conversation, whether it's a political one, whatever it is, what I try to do is say, all right, well, where can we agree? Let's start there and then work out. I think sometimes we try to get too specific, and that's, you know, that's, it's just not going to happen that way. And Tammy, I know you were waiting a long time.
Did you have something you wanted to just respond to quickly there, Sam?
No, not quickly.
Okay, well, I'll just jump in a little bit with other perspective. Just my own learning really right now, which is around creating space. So, you know, in coming to the Netherlands right now, I've left behind a lot of responsibilities. My family, the artery, certainly I've spent less time here. So this has created this space that is incredibly precious. And I find myself discovering a new center, and that center being space. So as I listen to this conversation, there feels like there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of not space necessarily. And I just wanted to share my experience of creating that space has been incredible. And it means that I have a lot more choice, that I can come from a different center in myself when I share, and that it's not about fitting in or moving forward my agenda. And fuck, I've been full of agenda for years. You know, I've got some shit I want to do. And I think that the weight of knowing, of you know, greater comprehension, greater understanding, of trying to weave it all together, of taking, you know, too big of a bite of the universe in a way. I feel like I'm letting go of that need more and more. And I'm just opening to what does creating space really look and feel like? What gets embodied differently when I don't feel that I'm responding based on what someone else needs or what is socially or culturally acceptable or what I've promised to do before. But rather, what does this moment want me to show up as, to respond in a way that is not just shouldering responsibility, but responding to this changing center of who am I? So not necessarily fully integrated with the conversation that has been had, but I wanted to bring the perspective of what I'm holding in this little portion of the screen. And with that, I know we're close to the end. So I'll use that as my checkout. Thanks, everyone. Really good to see everyone here.
Are heading toward top of hour, so I just ask any next shares be last shares, so we wrap up reasonably close to time.
Okay, so I'll check out with where I was going with my last comment, and that is that in this phenomenon, we're coming at this with possibly widely, but even if it's only subtly different perspectives and skill sets. The question in my mind is always, where does one's responsibility lie? I think that this question comes, and Doug, I think you alluded to it as well, which is when we come to a conversation, either one-on-one or in a group, how do I come prepared? Am I prepared to listen? Am I prepared with well-formed thoughts? Am I prepared to generate, not, no, to be that generous with curiosity, to really let something land before I give an immediate, from the hip response? Am I really coming from personal experience, or am I quoting a book? All these different things are personal presentation skills, and I've probably left out hundreds. But then there's also a question when something happens in the conversation where I or someone else says, hey, that landed on me, painfully, or I got triggered or whatever. Then the question is that a group responsibility? Does the group need to take a moment there and just address that? I think there's subtle gradations here, and I don't think it's just a very simple yes or no. I think the responsibility lies in both places, and in particular around the individual's support circle. I think to always make it the group responsibility, in some cases, and possibly this one may be okay, but in most cases where there's actually more focus and more appreciation for group collaboration and agendas and objectives and goals, and yes, they are still existent, in the real world, then there really is a real question of should we just hold everything and just address, some person's triggers? It's not just an emotional question. There's questions about efficacy and appropriateness. So anyway, I just want to put those questions on the table because it's not a simple phenomenon to address when I just make the observation that, it sounds obvious in retrospect that we all come to it with different perspectives and different skill sets, but that's not often always recognized in conversations, and especially with meanings of words. Anyway, I've probably said too much. Each of those statements has another whole conversation behind it, but thank you very much for listening. And thanks for the time at the beginning of the session too. I really appreciate that.
I'll check out. I just want to say that I think we need to ask more questions. So if you hear laughter, instead of assuming it's nervous laughter or assuming that they're laughing at you, say, oh, what made you laugh? And that's what I think we don't do enough. We don't ask. And with that, I'm complete.
I like to check out with my understanding of, put it differently. I'm leaving with a lot of considerations about how to have conversations, but particularly how about to have a conversation about the different belief systems you're holding. Because I have my belief system, and that's a whole dictionary behind me explaining what I see and what the world is and how the words come out. And as soon as they touch anybody else's, even if this group is a rather close cultural background, I think there's all we see is the complexity of the misunderstandings. The misunderstanding is born at the very moment I assume I understand you, and I am deeply interested in belief systems and whatever the name is, value systems, basically, all these systems, strategy systems we use to survive. And we discussed it wants, needs. I could go there, but that's basically what I take away. And my sympathy lies with Sam's never-ending willingness to find harmony between the most difficult people as well. Thank you.
Do you have any parting shares? Not mandatory.
Yeah, just to riff on what Stacy said a few ago, and to kind of wrap up the idea of moving a conversation forward one note at a time on a map of some sort, a mind map, I think is what I probably should say. People are probably wondering where I'm I think mind map is the most appropriate word, closest to what people could understand I'm trying to get at. But when you're having that conversation, and I saw this graphic somewheres, where somebody has a X and Y grid of their understanding, their plane of understanding, and they're standing on their grid, and then somebody else is standing on their grid, and there's a certain overlap, but they're not completely overlapped. And then I see that is what Harry's talking about, the knowledge of what you're bringing, or your belief system. This is what you draw from your well of knowledge, or your plane of understanding, and you're building a third one together. So, and you might not take everything from your map and put it on the third one, but as you need to clarify and more nuance, and that's a relationship, you pull more stuff out of your existence and bring it to the common existence between the person. So that's co-creating, or whatever, a co-creating understanding of what your position is for as a gift to the other person, to move their understanding of you further. And if they're not willing to receive that, and they already have in their mind made up what kind of person you are, it's not a fair game. So, that's where you need to be able to check at the door when people are playing these games, and manipulative people, and people who may be just not have the skill, or are sabotaging one way or another, sabotaging themselves. I just see a lot of that. And the idea is, if you could visualize where the information is coming from, where you're trying to share it together, and then what was said, and how you can correct what may have been misunderstood as you get more nuance, that's an investment. And that's what I see the conversation maps as being. And once you have it started, they don't just come from anywhere, but it's a chicken and egg question how it gets built. But after it is built, then you tend to it like a garden of that understanding. And it's in the past, people have written books, and people with very eloquent speech, and they can make chapters and paragraphs, and they can clean up their thoughts and eloquently try to be understood. But I'm talking about the next generation tool, where it's not just a blog, but it's a weaved understanding. And I see other people see this. It's not just me who sees this, but maybe what I'm seeing is, if people are appreciative enough to go outside of that anything goes space to the, we're going to have a framing conversation of context, and move that forward, and then back and forth from the emotional to the tracking of it. And it's a very kind of a cold thing to do, but it's also a very painful thing to be misunderstood. So it has to be worth it to bring that analysis into the fact that you don't understand what I'm talking about. And if you can't understand what I'm talking about, either I'm not saying it properly, I'm not showing it properly, or you're just have different colored glasses on. You've got rose-colored glasses on. You just don't see the world the way I see it. And I think it's important to get down to that level of a fair playing field. And I think a lot of chaos is made so people can get away with a lot of desires that they don't want to be explaining or seen doing. And art is a free license to do that on a canvas or in a song or wherever. But when it comes down to having to understand somebody else, it does get down to the cold nuances of mapping it out, I think. And it's, if you're a kind person, you can hold it without having to actually put it on the physical paper. You can map out in your mind what the other person has said and they're giving. But when there's a lot of confusion and it keeps going back and forth and misunderstanding, it's time to sharpen the pencil. That's kind of what I'm getting. And I'm looking for these examples of confusion that could be straightened out, and seeing what falls out in version 2, 3, 4 of trying to understand with people who want to understand and not bully and not lie. Anyway.
Dave, any parting thoughts or share?
Nice to see everybody.
Good to see you. Well, this brings us to the end of another Sunday Unblocking, a classic. And I appreciated the opportunity. I did more sharing than I usually do. I appreciate the hear, the listen. And I feel like we're tugging at the threads to understand us. And there's not more important work in the world than that. So with that, I'm complete, and thank you all very, very, very much for making my Sunday.